Welcome to the Silent Podcast. I'm your host, Arbana Xharra. Today we are joined by one of the world's foremost experts on terrorism, violent extremism, and radicalization, Dr. Anne Speckhard. As a director of the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism, she has spent decades interviewing more than 800 terrorists, ISIS defectors, suicidal bombers, and extremists from around the world, to understand what drives people toward violence and how they can be brought back. Her work has advised governments, NATO, the U.S. Department of Defense, and international organizations on counterterrorism, rehabilitation, and preventing violent extremism. Anne, thank you so much for being my guest, and I'm honored to have you today.
Thank you, Arbana. I'm honored to be speaking with you and with your audience.
You've interviewed more than 800 terrorist extremists and defectors. After all these years, what is the single biggest lesson you've learned about why people embrace violence?
Okay. When I got to about 400 terrorists, people were asking me what makes a terrorist. And I came up with a theory that I call the lethal cocktail of terrorism. And now at this age, after interviewing 800 terrorists, I think it's kind of funny that other people came up with the staircase of terrorism, all these other models, but I came up with a cocktail. Maybe it says something about me, but meaning that there's 4 necessary and sufficient ingredients to make a terrorist. There's almost always a group. It's very, very rare that you see someone move into terrorism all by themselves. So they might not be formally affiliated with the group, but the second thing, there's an ideology, and the group makes the ideology. And in the rare case that it's a terrorist that exists all on his own, he writes his own manifesto. But we usually find that these are copies of other people's manifestos and that they're really resonating with the ideology of a group. So you might see someone, and I did interview people like this, 2 guys from Hamas who said they were totally independent, but they were following Hamas ideology. They made their bomb just like Hamas. They did their action just like Hamas. But the reason that they functioned independently was that Hamas will never send brothers. So if one had already gone on a suicide, they would say, no, your mother doesn't deserve that. Same thing with other types of terrorists. They very rarely act on their own. So the first thing is the group. The group provides the materials. It tells you who to bomb. It justifies it. It tells you, so it starts to build an ideology. And in the case of terrorists and violent extremists, it's almost always defensive. So militant jihadists will say, our country is being attacked, our women are being raped, Islam is under attack. You have to, brother, join and fight back. But you'll also see white supremacists with similar arguments. They'll say, our white heritage is under attack, immigrants are taking our jobs, our country is being overtaken, we have to fight, we have to use violence. We saw this with abortion clinic terrorists on both sides of the issue. People that were against abortion said we have to save babies, and they're being murdered. So if you take a gun and go shoot an abortion doctor, it's a defensive act on behalf of babies. We saw it on the other side that you should burn down crisis pregnancy centers on behalf of abortion rights. So there's a group, there's an ideology. The ideology is almost always defensive. Then the third thing is, how much social support is there? If, like right now, if we were to go to Gaza, we would probably find really high social support. Same thing in Iran. Maybe they weren't thinking of doing suicide bombings against us, but when a country is under attack, when civilians are being killed, suddenly there's strong social support. And then the fourth thing is, I'll just finish and then I'll let you ask your next question. The fourth thing is what's inside the individual. And that's usually a need for belonging, significance, purpose, and in some cases, if they're in a conflict zone, for revenge. And so those are the 4 things that I say are necessary and sufficient to make a terrorist.
Nothing happens over the night. So it starts from somewhere. And I remember in 2014 when I was covering the younger generation joining Islamic State at the time from different parts of the Europe, even Canada, and they were not Muslims, they were also Christians. And from Belgium, 500 men and women joined it. So this, how they start getting involved into the ideology, because they have to start thinking towards that ideology and then to be ready to commit suicide, to kill people. So I want you to explain this. How can a parent get signals from their children? It might not be a religious family at all, but the 16-year-old, 17-year-old start online getting recruited. So how does it start before going and committing a suicide or terrorist attack?
Okay, it's important to understand that not everybody takes on the ideology. They may be exposed to it. They may be strongly indoctrinated once they get into the group. So people that joined ISIS, all the men had to go for Sharia training. And that's when they really strongly got the ideology. So people don't necessarily join for ideology. But as I always say, no one joins a group except it meets their needs. So it gives them a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, significance in their life. It gives them a mission. In the case of Islamic State, people that went to join Islamic State believed it was going to be this beautiful utopian state and that it was going to follow Islam correctly. And perhaps they were in a situation where they were suffering prejudice and they thought, no, I'll go somewhere where I'll belong completely. Maybe they had financial difficulties. I'm going somewhere where they're going to give me housing and a job, whatever the thing was, or I'm going to help save Syrians that are being killed by Assad. So they had all this purpose driving them on a personal level. But as soon as they got there, they were put into a machinery and it flipped on them. Now the purpose is the group's purpose, not their purpose.
Yes.
So to go back to your question of what do we do with teenagers? Well, we have to understand as parents, there's studies in the US, I don't know about globally, that we talk to our kids maybe 10 minutes a day. And that might be take out the trash, what do you want for dinner, when's your football practice tomorrow, really logistic type things. Are we talking about what is your purpose in life? Where do you belong? What's your significance? And some of that's not talking. Some of that is, the atmosphere of the family. But I always say you can live in a conflict zone even if the conflict zone is your family, if it's a violent family. And you can live in a situation where you're not getting your needs met. And parents need to understand when a kid takes their computer or their phone and goes to their room and closes the door, they can suddenly be spending hours with a person that their whole purpose is to figure out, what do you need? And how can I give it to you? You're not making it with the girls? Well, in the case of Islamic State, come here, we'll get you married. Your parents don't understand you. Oh, well, they're not really following the true Islam. Let me tell you what the true Islam is. And this happens in every situation. It's not just ISIS. So white supremacists, same thing. Or anti-government militia or abortion clinic bomber. They'll say, oh, you had an abortion? Well, they shouldn't have done that. And you feel guilty now. Well, of course you feel guilty. It was a real child, and you should stop these people from providing abortions, whatever it is. But they're spending hours.
But you're mentioning coming from different religion and different perspectives. What I was focused mostly on Islamic religious groups. How could they come to the point that they say Islam is the religion of peace? But then, if they are following the religion of peace, how they are convinced then in name of Allah to kill people? Same, you mentioned the abortion. How would they justify to kill a doctor in name of being against abortion? So can you explain this?
Sure. I think if you ask anyone, I have 3 children and now I have grandchildren, if you tell me in front of my eyes my children are being attacked violently, I'll do anything to save them, and I will kill the attacker. I'm not from a revenge culture, so if they've already killed my family, I'm not going to go hunt them down and kill them. But if I'm from a revenge culture and I believe it's the only thing to stop more killings, maybe I will. So everyone has to say there are things for which I will kill. And most of us, it's our children. Most of us would protect, if we're men, we would protect our women from rape, and we would be violent for it. There's sacred things that you would be violent for. So when you're talking about militant jihadists, number one, they've been convinced that something is happening that's so wrong, that it's so against Islam, that the Islamic thing to do is to kill. And that exists in every moral system, except those that are 100% nonviolent and just believe that you should, suffer patiently anything. But most have a line and say, for this, you should fight back. So militant jihadists believe that they are fighting back against a greater evil and that it's ordained by Allah. And if we really start looking at the religion of Islam, of course it's a religion of peace. And the whole point of Islam is to teach people how to get along with one another, how to organize a government, how to organize it in the way that you can have the strongest relationship to God and live in a godly manner. But there are explanations for if someone else comes and attacks you, how should you fight back? And there's very clear rules. You shouldn't uproot an olive tree. You should never kill anybody, a monk, a rabbi, a sheikh. You shouldn't kill any religious person. You shouldn't kill women and children. But then there's exceptions. If they come and kill all your women and children, if they rape your women and children, if they haul your women away, can you do the same to them? And the answer in Islam is yes. So, but there's exceptions to that too, in telling you shouldn't do it if you can avoid doing it. But then think about a jihadist that wants to make a terrorist group. He's going to twist all these scriptures, and he's going to only focus on the violence promoting ones and not tell you that you're supposed to live peacefully, and only emphasize peace between the people that are inside that group.
When I started, I didn't really understand much about the religion, and I had imams who were liberal to explain to me what is happening within their community. And it really, I'm to this day very grateful to them that helped me do my work. So it starts within their family. It's how propaganda within the religion also works to brainwash you in certain ways. I remember I had a case, this man who lived in Germany for 30 years and came back in Kosovo. He was wealthy. So his kids, very young, start going to this mosque with imam who had an agenda, and both of them were brainwashed because they were saying to them that Americans are against Muslim countries, so we have to hate Americans, we have to hate Western countries, and both of them ended up in Syria as an ISIS members. And the father explains how terrifying was within a very open pro-Western Muslim family, their kids to be brainwashed to that extent. So they will not shake hands with the family members, like with the women or women with men. So and we are seeing what is happening in Afghanistan, what is happening in Iran, not just extremism, not just terrorist groups, but how religion is used to suppress millions of women. In Afghanistan, as they don't have any basic rights. Same in Iran, if they see your hair is uncovered. So basically, what does Quran say? Should you cover or should you not cover? Is it mandatory to cover? And what millions of women are suffering? And again, not their families are not suicide or bombers, but they are suppressing their daughters and girls. So this is how it starts.
I don't think it always starts there. I think we have to acknowledge that there's this whole world politics. So if you go back to Syed Qutb and the Egyptians, they were seeing that Western powers were propping up dictators. And that's true. The U.S. has propped up dictators around the world, in South America and the Middle East and so on. And these dictators torture their own people. And it was in our trade interest and our interest of having peaceful relations as far as we're concerned with these countries so that we could benefit, that their people were suppressed. So Syed Qutb came up with the idea, and Al-Qaeda came up with, you have to strike the head of the snake. So you have to get to the person that's propping up your dictator and strike him down. And, there is some sense to that logic. But the real thing is people need to live in justice. And if they're living with extreme injustice, you can expect terrorism. So this guy that was living in Germany and wealthy and probably well-educated is seeing world politics. And then at the same time, he's having an Islamic group that's more focused on terrorism tell him, well, of course you should strike down the head of the snake, and you should be against America and against the West, against the Soviet
I think, sorry to interrupt you, I think these imams, it's a broader agenda, because they were openly preaching against all the Western values, not just America. So because over the night his daughter-in-law covered in the burqa. So the agenda is much broader to get all these young, because there are thousands coming from Western countries, to convince them that this is the better religion, that this one. Not all these kids, because most of them are also victims, are going to follow a path immediately thinking that I'm going to become a suicide or bomber, but they are brainwashed from the beginning. It's my opinion, you are an expert too, how it starts. You go to the mosque and you listen the way imam is preaching to you. It doesn't matter what your parents are saying. The imam is going to have more influence in your kid rather than the parent that is going to be totally the opposite.
Okay, well, if we're talking about Kosovo, we have to remember that certain parts of the world got this huge influx of Saudi money, and they built big mosques, and they got much more conservative Islam than what was originally in the country. So Turkish interpretation of Islam was originally in Kosovo, but suddenly you have Wahhabism, and it's very conservative, and it is a stepping stone into Salafism, into Al-Qaeda, ISIS type groups. At the same time, you have world politics that's also a stepping stone, as I just told you, that you can be convinced that you're going to defend the world. I mean, it didn't happen in a vacuum that kids went from Kosovo to Syria. A lot of them that I talked to, and I talked to actual people that went, they said, I was watching videos of Syrian young men and women showing the dead bodies that Assad had killed and saying, Muslims over the world, where are you? Why aren't you coming to fight for us? And everyone that's religious believes in their religion and believes that they have calls and duties. And one of the calls in Islam is you must always stand up for your Islamic brothers and sisters. Well, if they're being mass murdered and your imam is telling you this interpretation of Islam is the correct one, and you have a duty and you should go. And not only that, they're going to raise up this glorious Islamic State. It's going to be the right one. And we don't know where these imams were getting their money from. I mean, maybe they also had a financial incentive to send people over.
From Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, there were millions coming in Kosovo. And as I said, in other parts of the world, there was this young boy from Canada. And the mother was saying he was wearing a cross and he became a member of Syria. As an expert and psychologist, tell me, do you think that these days, because of all the algorithms, social media, because before there were certain ways to recruit younger generation, you go to the mosque or different gatherings, but today even gaming can recruit kids. Is it risky these days, more higher risk than it was before to recruit younger generation into different extremist organizations?
Well, it used to be that you had to go somewhere. You had to go and join a group. So you're making me think of Blerim Skoro. Do you know Blerim
Yep.
Skoro's
Yeah.
story? Okay. Blerim asked me to write his book, and then it didn't work out. But I spent months and months interviewing him. And for your audience that doesn't know, Blerim agreed with the CIA to go undercover, and he pretended to be a jihadist that had been released from American prison. He had gone to American prison as a drug dealer. And when he got released from prison, he had been already pretending to be a militant jihadist in prison in the U.S. And he got deported back to Kosovo. And he believed that his way to get back to the U.S. to his wife and his children was to work for the CIA. So he pretended. And he said he was completely shocked. He thought that he was going to be sent to Pakistan. He did get sent to Pakistan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, where you would expect there to be terrorists. But he said they were in my backyard. They were all over the place in Kosovo. All these young people that believed that they were on a mission. So he sat and talked to them, and he would buy with CIA money weapons, and he would get a whole building full of weapons and then alert the CIA, who would come and destroy them. But these weapons were to start a civil war in your area and to take over the area. So we have to say there's tons of influences on people nowadays. And terrorist recruitment and violent extremist recruitment is happening primarily over the internet nowadays because everybody's got a phone. And if you've got a phone, you've got a portal into a terrorist group. You don't have to travel to Pakistan. So like Blerim on CIA money and Undercover went and joined Al-Qaeda, made his bay'ah to Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. And when he came back, he tried not to lie. He would just let people come up with their own assumptions about him, and he would pretend that he was, with Osama bin Laden. And he was on some level because that's what he had pretended there as well. And others were very impressed by that. And every young man is trying to find his path to manhood. And if he believes this is what men do to become men, and they fight for their religion, and, they travel to Islamic State. Islamic State was just being set up at that point, although Blerim went and saw that too. And So when I think of what was going on in Kosovo, it was such a time of change. And really, Kosovars, all of them, should be friends with the U.S. because we're the ones that came and saved the Kosovars from Serbian attack.
That's true.
But
We're
it
one
got
of the most pro-American country. We name kids by the politicians. That's why when I started writing, I wanted to find out what is happening because we were in war. We didn't fight for religion. Albanians were always secular. Like they Serbs killed Christians, Muslims. So it was not a war for religion. All of a sudden, and after the war, not over the night, money was coming, money was coming. And as I said, families coming up from the war, they don't have commodity to think about if my son goes to mosque, what's going to happen to him or my daughter. So they were very young, 7, 8, 10 years old, offering free English and computer courses and asking in return to learn about Islam and telling them, you are not enough good Muslims, you have to pray in this different way. That's why these liberal imams started having problems because they were the first to be attacked because they wanted to eliminate the more of the liberal voice within the religion. But as you said, everybody has a phone these days. They believe to an imam which says girls cannot paint their nails because it's haram. You see, that's what I'm trying to say. It's the religion that they are using to change totally the cultural side of the society. And then some of them might go to the different path, which is more extreme, some of them more radical. But these imams are having now huge influence because they talk about everything. They come outside, they have hundreds of thousands of followers and everywhere, not just in the Balkans. I can see them here, I can see them in Switzerland, the mosque, in Austria, Germany, all the Europe. How did they manage to have this much power among younger generations?
Okay, I lived in Belgium, I think, for 7 years, 9 years. I don't remember. I was in Brussels, and the main mosque, I used to go there to take Arabic lessons. It was controlled by the Saudis, and it's not anymore. The Belgians changed that. But at first, all the intelligence agencies didn't really have awareness of Arabic language, of Islam until 9/11, and then they had to do catch up. But as they caught up, they started to understand that the Saudi money is going everywhere, building these huge mosques. And imagine, I went to Uzbekistan and I spoke for the Foreign Service, and their technology was just amazing in their headquarters. I mean, the computers at every desk and the screens, and I was speaking, I was on every screen, and I was thinking, this is not that rich of a country. And I never saw anything like that at State Department or at the Department of Defense, maybe, yes. But I asked them, how do you have this state-of-the-art technology? Oh, they said it's all from Saudi. And so if someone is pouring money, but at the same time telling you your interpretation of your religion is wrong, it's more conservative, then you're going to have a clash of cultures. And some people are going to follow the money, or they're going to believe I'm supposed to be more conservative. And we have that with every religion. I mean, here in the US, there's people that are very conservative. I mean, sometimes I go to the Catholic Church and I see these girls, young girls, wearing veils. I mean, it's not any different than young Muslims deciding that they, have to wrap up or even cover their faces. They become convinced this is the true religion. You're supposed to cover yourself. And
But again, you're not going to be killed in the United States if, as in Iran, if your hair is being shown. At least here you are not killed. So I just want to make, because especially younger generation that are supporting some, and it's confusion, it's political thing, but honestly I am very concerned working for over 25 years in this field to see younger generation in the United States not knowing what means to be the leader of Iran or Afghanistan. I can understand if you are not satisfied with the administration, or historically we had some of the presidents that Americans didn't like. But unless you live under those regimes, you would understand what it means to live under. I was beaten up just because I was a journalist and I was writing with facts and arguments. And I understand your point, but it's also the education of the Western culture, because how they are brainwashing kids in the Western countries with all the algorithm that is coming outside. If I'm going to see a video a certain way, I'm going to be fed with the same algorithm. My brain is going to think that this is the right thing, but maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe that's not the truth.
Your religion is right, and my interpretation of your religion is this, and you should do this. I can give you certainty. I can give you peace. I can make things calm for you while you're having all this anxiety on another level. I mean, all these things come together. And then keep in mind in Kosovo, I remember going around with my translator, Ardian Shekovsky. Everywhere we went in Kosovo, he was a 17-year-old working as a journalist. And he's like, oh, here we uncovered mass graves. And I had to go in and, there were bodies. It was horrible. And there were some old people that the Serbs didn't kill. And I had to interview them. And just horrible PTSD. And maybe he has PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, more than your average Kosovar. But a lot of people suffered trauma. So here you have this religious guy coming and saying, I can heal your trauma. I can show you the right way. Or your parents are so traumatized that they're not dealing with real life and all these jobs that used to give them a living, they're not making a living. I can show you how. Oh, and if you put on a headscarf and you come to the mosque regularly, I can even give you a stipend because I have a lot of money. And, so all these things come together. And if you're a parent, I would say the warning to you is ask your kids what they're learning. Whatever group they're going to. If they're going to the mosque, try to go with them and find out what's being preached there. Ask them what they're getting over their phones and over the internet, and talk to them and be a loving, supportive family, because if you have love and belonging elsewhere, you're less likely to fall into it with a group that's violent. But if you have nothing, you'll go where your needs are met. That's why we need very, very good Islamic scholars, and we need to help them to get their message out. Because one of the things that we did with ISIS, we called it Breaking the ISIS Brand. All our videos are still up on our ICSVE YouTube channel. And what we did, I interviewed 276 ISIS members. And if they didn't like ISIS anymore, I said, okay, we're making a 2-hour video of a research interview. If I chop it down and try to talk to the person that you used to be over the keyboard, what would you want to say to that person to warn them what you got into and why it wasn't what you thought it was going to be? And these 276 people, there were very few that said no, they wouldn't do it. Some said you have to cover my face because they'll kill me, change my name. We did that. But they would say things like, we always told the story of why they went in. So I'm in Belgium and I'm facing prejudice and I don't like it. And Islamic State told me, everyone is going to be one people, one religion. Come to Syria. We have an apartment for you and you will live, and we're making a real Islamic State. We need people like you that have skills. Or they came to Kosovo and they said, brother, Muslims came and fought for you. Do you remember Srebrenica? Do you remember the massacres from the Serbs? Well, now it's happening in Syria. It's your turn to go. You have to go. And imagine, that as a Kosovar, if somebody says to you, people are suffering like your country suffered, and you were saved, you have to save them now. That's going to pull on your heartstrings. And all of these different ways that they get people to go. But we have to fight back with counter messaging. And in the UK, in the beginning, they had all these Islamic scholars create websites and speak about Islam, and it didn't do a whole lot because it's very flat. So in our videos, we made them action. The guy says why I went, when I got there, what my dream was. I thought we're going to make this beautiful Islamic State. I was so excited. They gave me a gun. They said I had to fight. I didn't expect to be a fighter, but okay. I went Sharia and military training. It's pretty exciting, shooting a gun. I kind of liked it. But then I went to a real battle. And I saw what real killing and battle was. I didn't like it at all. I wanted to get out. And they said, no, if you get out, you go to prison. They put me in prison. They tortured me. They were very unjust. They were worse than any dictator around the world. And they weren't helping the Syrian people. They were only interested in their own self-interest. It wasn't Islam. So they made these messages, and we made them with music, with nasheeds, with Islamic knowledge. And we put them back out on the video, on the internet, and we named them names just like ISIS. So they have disgusting names, like the glorious cubs of the caliphate. And we knew by algorithm, they will go with Islamic State videos. So some kids reading all the Islamic State videos and going, I should join. And then one of ours comes up and he's like, wait a minute, Is this a real guy? Yeah, he's a real guy. And he's telling me what his story was. Oh, maybe I shouldn't go. And we know of cases where people were convinced not to go from our videos. So we have to find emotional ways to talk to people that really activate them. But one problem with breaking the ISIS brand is we could break their brand and say this isn't the way to go, but we didn't provide another answer of what is the way to go. Because especially when you're young, you want to have a path. You want to have some sense of certainty, like I'm building something, I'm going to become somebody, I belong somewhere. And that's what we need our good sheikhs to build. And, the mosque should be somewhere where you can get an education and you can be pushed out to be a productive part of your community, where you're taught to stand up to corruption. Because, there's a lot of corruption in Kosovo. And not to go to some foreign country, but to speak to your own president with some courage and say, no, what you're doing is wrong.
Every parent's concern is today, and that's why as you as an expert, I wanted to explain and warn parents how to, as you've mentioned, very, very good advice to talk to their kids. It doesn't matter, again, which ideology, which extremist groups can get their kids. And as you said, if these days AI is taking most of the jobs, what's going to happen with these kids?
Right.
You don't, yeah, if they are going to be disappointed. You spent $100,000 for a degree and then you're going to be stay home. What's going to happen with the kid staying in the room, being disappointed in the system, in the future, scared?
That's what I think we need to look forward to in the West, that it looks like injustice right now. We're seeing accumulation of wealth up on the very top and everybody else facing this extreme uncertainty. And, am I going to be provided for? Is there going to be a basic income? Is there going to be health insurance? Or are we just going to be poor and all these other people are going to be jet setting around? And in that case, of course, there's going to be people that are going to tell them, well, you should use pipe bombs or you should suicide yourself. And it doesn't have to be Islam. It can be anything. It can be leftist extremism. It can be white supremacism. It can be anything. But they're going to convince kids that are afraid and angry and frustrated and not seeing any future for themselves to go and carry out extremist acts. And, maybe we'll have an AI that has a police force and robots controlling all of us. But still, some of them are going to figure out how to go around that and to be violent. So let's hope that we get a just society and that wealth is distributed in a fair way, that there's health care for everyone, and that our kids can see a future for themselves. Because no parent can talk to their kid and say, yeah, it's unjust, just tolerate it. Because as human beings, we don't tolerate injustice. We have actually in our brains something that teaches us not to tolerate injustice. And I agree with you to point your kids to some morality, to some either God or morality of, here's the lines of what is human goodness, and these are the things that are just absolutely wrong, and you never should cross over it. Because I have talked to people that were going into extremism, and when they were taught the ideology and encouraged by their group to carry out violence, something held them back. And what held them back was the way their parents had raised them. That no, you would never be violent to another human being, unless they were, attacking your family or something. And so work hard to instill those values in your kids so that when they are confronted with something that tells them that they should be violent, they say, no, that's not right.
Yeah. But for those who are listening and watching us, since you had interviewed 800 people in prison being a part of different extremist groups, do you see how many of them regret what they have done, or how many of them have realized that they've been brainwashed?
What I found in the case of ISIS, because that's the ones that I did the most interviews recently, that they were definitely sorry for having hurt other people. But most of them hadn't come to that complete, what I would call repentance, of taking personal responsibility for what they did. And they blamed the group. So they blamed brainwashing. They blamed the ideology. They felt that they had been fooled. But in my opinion, if I was working with that person, I would bring them all the way to say, yes, and I agreed to be a cog in that machinery. I agreed to serve them, and I did hurt other people, and that's on me. And I can blame the group, but I have to be sorry for what I did and for what I allowed this group to do by helping them. Instead of, like, I was talking to people that were in prison, so they were still, most of them were in prison. In Kosovo, they weren't. But if they are so concerned with their own future, am I going to get out of this prison? Am I now a victim of this prison regime? I mean, there's lots of ISIS women that haven't gotten out yet, and they don't even have charges against them. So there's an injustice with that too. But you want them to get all the way to repentance so that they change themselves. And many of them said, I would never, ever take up arms for an Islamic State again because it's stupidity. I mean, trying to fight the existing world order, with guns, it's just, the elite of this world aren't going to let you get away with it.
Yeah, I remember there was this video, at the time was not AI, maybe 10 years ago more. They shared the video, how beautiful it is to live in Syria, part of ISIS. There were houses with pool. They said, we're going to give you this golden, I don't know what they were, gold basically. And they believed that that's what's going to be there. And I remember the men went first and the wives and the children were back. Do you think that universities and governments are really working in this regard the way you are doing your job?
I think that there could be a lot more done, but I want to push back on the women because there's plenty of women that went as victims. There's women, and I talked to one of them in Kosovo that she had no idea where she was going. Her husband said they were going to Turkey. I talked to one in Europe. She said they were going on vacation in Turkey. Both of them ended up in Syria. And the woman from Kosovo, she just didn't really, I think she went to Montenegro first. They were going to go work in a hotel.
Remember in Ulsan, I wrote about the article, and they had a daughter, 3 or 4-year-old.
Yeah, and so some of these women were tricked, but there's plenty of women, the women that are in the camps now, some of them from the Balkans, that are true believers in ISIS. And they've been offered to come back, and they've said no, they don't want to. And for me, I think it's criminal that they don't take their children away from them. And the thinking is you don't have a right to sever the relationship between a mother and a child. And my view is if your mother is worshiping ISIS and believing ISIS is right,
what's going to happen to those kids?
That's child abuse. And in all cases of child abuse, we have laws where we separate mothers from their children. And I think we should just round all those kids up and bring them home because children very quickly readapt. Yes. And they change. So we have many examples of children that have come back to Kosovo and to other places where they went to school, they became normal. It took longer for their mothers to adapt back to normalcy because they did get so believing that this was the true Islam when they covered themselves the whole thing.
I remember I had one case that I worked, she's from Mitrovica. She was 23-year-old when she went to Syria and she was leading women camp. She was fighting and she didn't regret.
Right.
Because I was talking with Viber with some women there because they were giving me information what is happening. And they, as you said, they didn't know what's happening. They couldn't come back, but they were so scared to speak because these women who were basically, as you said, worshiping ISIS, controlling all other women. So the women are recruiters too. So
no, they beat them up in the camps. I'm in contact with Huda Mathana. She's in the camp in Syria. She's in Camp Al-Roj, and she's been beaten up by these hardcore ISIS women. She sent me pictures of the bruises on her body, and they beat her in front of her son. And her son was born there, so he's innocent. I mean, he didn't choose to join ISIS. And she did choose, but she was completely duped by people that were telling her this is the true Islamic State. If you don't come, you'll burn up in hell. And she was young and believed it. And after she got there, she saw the truth and she stepped away from it. And all these years, our country has refused to bring her back. She left from the U.S. And, it's just tragic. But there are hardcore women that will beat the other ones. So we have to be very smart when we deal with anybody coming back from these groups to make sure that they get rehabilitated and some of them are going to be liars, but most of them, if you take a good shake, I have a good shake on our staff, and if we go and talk to people, they start admitting very quickly what they believe in. And then you have to just help to educate them, because what they believe in is not the true Islam. And if you have a good sheikh that's very well educated in Islam, he can take it apart. I've watched our sheikh take it apart for people, and they start to cry. They get really scared, because if you believe in Islam, you believe if you do the wrong things, you're going to go to hell. And so if they believe that they killed, but not in the name of Allah, suddenly they're terrified. And then, they're like, oh my God, I believed the wrong thing. How do I get it right? And so with skillful practitioners, you can pull people completely out of this and help them repent and put their life back on a positive track. But that takes money, it takes work, and a lot of countries just don't even want to bother with it. They're like, just stay in Syria.
That's why I'm saying it's your articles. I remember me and a few other journalists were writing. I don't know when was the last time you wrote something in the Balkans regarding this topic. And it's not that it got better. No, it did not.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that you don't have to be in Pakistan, you don't have to be in Syria to be an extremist, because they are working, giving direction to their individuals in other countries. So I remember in 2000, I don't know, like 16, there was a football match about to be held in Skoro in Albania between Israel and Albania.
Exactly.
And a 17-year-old boy was getting instruction from Syria to commit an attack, and Mossad prevented that, arrested them. So you don't have to be even there to be involved or a part of this extremist groups.
No, they just they get you on the phone. They just get you on the phone, and they start talking to you, and they find out what you need. So we had a girl that she was on Twitter. Remember when the journalist James Foley was beheaded? She put
Yes.
it out on Twitter. Why would ISIS behead James Foley? They answered her. And suddenly she had 100 ISIS friends on her Twitter, and they were talking to her, and they were saying, are you a Muslim? She said, no, I'm a Christian, and I'm a Sunday school teacher. And they said, that's great. But did you know that Islam is the completion of Christianity? And she was living with her grandmother. Her mother was an alcoholic. So she's, oh, really? And they said, can we tell you about Islam? Yes, yes. Oh, okay, I converted. Let's send you candies and a headscarf. They did it. Yeah. Then I think I will go to the mosque. No, no, no. The mosque in America, it won't teach you the right Islam. Listen to us. Could we send you plane tickets for you? And both of these kids were minors. They were under 18. Could we send tickets for you and your brother to come to join the real Islam in Syria? And luckily, there was someone in Canada, a sheikh, that was following this on Twitter, because some of it was public, and he intervened. And he helped her understand, this is not Islam. This is, like you say, brainwashing. It's recruitment into a terrorist group. And we have so many cases like that, where a young girl or a young man, and this guy in Skoro probably, didn't have things going good in his life, and somebody over the phone is talking to him. And think, right now we're talking over the internet. I don't know, are you in New York? I'm in Washington, D.C. I don't know where your audience is, but they're all experiencing like we're all in the same room. And that's the internet today. So someone from Pakistan, someone from Syria, maybe someone in your neighborhood, can be talking to you and invite you and encourage you and say, this is the road to manhood. This is how you become a truly good person. You fight for good. This is the real path of religion. And just step by step, but they're catering to what's inside of you that you need. I need a purpose. I need to belong to somebody. I need attention. I need a girl to pay attention to me if I'm a young man. And they keep giving them what they need until they convince them into what they don't need and what's truly evil.
Yeah, once two girls born, both of them in 2000. So I did the article in 2015, which both of them were 15-year-old. One was coming from the wealthy family, the other one from the poor family. Both of them were convinced to go to Syria and get married there, whatever, God knows what they were said. And the girl who was scared at the border, and because they were not going through Pristina, they would go to Macedonia. And when police asked them where they were going, I think at the moment she realized that it's very dangerous. They were 15 years old. and she told them, and they brought them back. 2 or 3 weeks later, I wake up in the morning and I read the news. The same girl was killed by her brother, who was a radical Islamist living. And they were saying that it was just by mistake. They had a gun in it, but we don't know what really happened. She was killed within her family. Was it accident or no? They was never find out. So it's very sad because, as we're mentioning, their age, how easy they were brainwashed. But when you don't have a system to protect them, or even these days, as you were saying, there is not much interest from the governments or a security institution to work in this regard. I'm personally also very concerned, working for this many years in field and seeing the recruitment process from 7 years old to when we became 25, 27, and what happened to them. It's very, very, very concerning. And the lack of education and the lack of opportunities. And as you said, all these factors are leading these kids to the very, very dangerous path. And I'm sure that your experience, your expertise, and first of all, thank you for everything you are doing, all because you are dedicating your life and your time to this major cause, which is also dangerous. It's not easy. And I know what you go through just interviewing them and seeing all this in front of your eyes. But I hope that this podcast will help parents that they have kids at the very risky age, which is teenagers these days, and also those who are in universities. As you said, not a specific age is targeted. Will at least take your advice to talk to them, speak with them, and be aware of what they are searching, what they are reading, what material they have been exposed to. Because I know from what I have seen, when they are brainwashed, it's very hard to bring them back. When they are convinced to something, it's very hard to bring them back.
The reason it's hard to bring them back, Scott Atran writes about this, he's an anthropologist, that there's this thing called fusion. And, when our kids are little, they're fused to us if we're good parents, especially mothers. And then eventually they start separating and they're looking for, where does my identity reside? Where do I belong? What's my purpose? And they fuse to their friends, to their schoolmates, to maybe a favorite teacher, maybe someone at the mosque. And they start to look for their direction, their purpose, their belonging away from their parents. And that's fine. And that's what they should do. That's their developmental task. But if we as parents start to see our kids spouting out hate of any kind, promoting violence of any kind, we have to take them back to their original values and say, no, my son or my daughter, hate is not justified, violence is not justified, and this is why. And absolutely, what you're speaking against, injustice, it does exist. Injustice is all over our world. And there are ways to fight injustice, but not the way that you're being taught by whoever this is. And bring them back, but always tell them that what they wish for is correct. I mean, I called it the ISIS dream. Everyone that had an ISIS dream, they wanted a glorious Islamic state. They wanted their religion to be kind and fair and good. They wanted it to take over the world and bring goodness and fairness to everyone. They wanted everyone to convert. But they didn't see that as a negative thing. They saw that as, bringing justice everywhere. That's a good thing. That's a good dream. But killing a whole bunch of people to get there is not a good dream. So you have to separate the two things of what you want, what you need. Those are appropriate. If you don't like that you don't belong anywhere, that you have no purpose, that you don't see your path, let me help you find your path. But don't resonate to these answers because they're not correct.
Yeah. And all this conversation reminds us that terrorism and violent extremism are not only security challenges. As you mentioned, there are also human challenges that require understanding, prevention, and informed public dialogue, which starts in the family and understand. And as the conflicts are happening around the world and the technology is evolving so rapidly, we really have to be aware and try at least to prevent from our home. And thank you so much again from all you're doing, your expertise, your suggestions, your time sharing with me today and our audience. This is very, very, very important topic. Thank you so much, Anne.
You're welcome. If you want to, I don't know if you're able to, but you can link the YouTube channel for anybody that wants to watch any of these 250 videos, because in my latest book, Homegrown Hate, was more about white supremacist and anti-government militias, but each chapter links to a video. So you can read about the person and then see their video, so you can see how these things play out in their own words. And you can also find all our writing and all my books on Amazon or on academia or on our website. Maybe you can put links.
Yes, definitely, because you've done an amazing work. Thank you for being my guest.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye.